Okay, the final stage is adding in your score. You can do it a couple of ways, but just for the sake of simplicity, I downloaded a couple of images, a 0 and a 1, a 2, and a 3. So all we need to do is bring these down into our composition, the 0 for example. And I'm just going to keep it simple. I'll show you one side only, how to basically program it, and you can copy the idea over to the other side and then go from there. So I'll bring a 0 in, and I'm also going to bring a 1 in. If you really want to spend some time to make it look nice, you can take these images, you can cut around them, you can do different things to them, change the color, invert them in Photoshop, or you can just find good ones online and stick with that. Either way, all we're going to do is we are going to place numbers on top of one another, turn some invisible and turn some visible. So I'll bring in the another 0 here. Well, I'll just duplicate this layer by going Apple D. So I've duplicated my 0 layer. So at the beginning of the game, you should see 0, 0. This 1 is going to come into play in a second, so I'm going to place it where it will go. It'll go right here when this player wins a point, but we don't want to see it yet. So what I'm going to do is, first of all, I would be very specific with my names here. I would go into this, I would click rename, and I would call this 1. I would call these, right click on them, be very specific so you're not going to get confused. This will be the challenging part, is staying organized with these. Rename 0. So you can double check and make sure by hitting your layer on and off, just to make sure you've done it correctly. So you're very clear with what these are called. So the 1 layer, we don't actually want that on right now. So we're going to go into the transform setting. You're very familiar with position because you've been using that to move things around. Now we're just going to go to opacity. So we're going to literally take the opacity of one of these layers, the 1, and we're going to turn it to 0. So you're going to take the 100, you're going to take your mouse and slide it to 0, and then you're going to initiate a keyframe. So we now know that at 0 frames, the 1 is there, but it's invisible. Let's slide over a little bit now. Let's assume after maybe 3 seconds or so, we want the 1 to appear and the 0 to disappear. So I'm going to go to the zeros. We've got a couple of them. So let's find out. You could even say 0L, 0R, but for now, let's just hit the eyeball to see which one is which. So I know that this one here is the same layer that I'm looking to transform. So transform, this 0 is going to disappear at this point. So I'm actually going to go back 1 frame, so to the 3-second mark, keyframe it in there at 100% opacity, and then the next frame, I'm now going to drop it to 0. So we've instructed the 0 to be visible for the first 3 seconds, and then go completely invisible right after that. At the exact same moment, we want this 1 to become visible. So I'm going to go up to the 1. I'm going to make sure I find the correct one. That's the 1. It's currently 0% visible, which is fine. So if we come over here and we go to opacity, if you change this in any way, even if you put a 1, for example, at this point, it would, or a 2, it would initiate a keyframe. Still completely invisible, and I know that some people have an easy time doing it that way. So you could do something simple like keep it relatively low, but either way, for now we're not going to do it that way. We just want it to simply have a 0 marker still at this point. So it is 0. If I click on the keyframe, it adds a keyframe here. So at any point, if you want to add one, just click the add or remove keyframe at current time. So we've kept it to the current 0 visibility. But at this point, I actually want it to become 100% visible. So I'm just lining this up. I just moved this keyframe over to completely coincide with the other number. So at this point now, I want it to go 100% visible. So all we've done is we've turned 1 layer from being 100% visible, the 0, and in 1 frame, we've gone from 100% visible to invisible, and we've done the exact opposite for the layer that was sitting directly on top of it. we've taken the 1 and we've gone from being completely invisible, so a 0% opacity, and we've gone in the next frame to 100% opacity. The only challenging part you might find is the amount of layers you will end up with. You'll have a large amount of layers in here, and which one ends up doing what. So be specific with your numbering. Be specific with your descriptions here. Also, a challenging component is you need to also define a keyframe before you change it. If I was to not have this keyframe here reminding us that it's 0, what could happen is you could have a slow fade in, because now from the very beginning of our timeline we said it's invisible here, so we're dealing with the 1. So the 1's invisible. Let's turn off the layers above it. The 1 is invisible all the way through here. From this yellow keyframe to this keyframe, it's invisible. And then very abruptly we go from invisible to visible. But watch what happens if I delete that 1 keyframe. If I delete this one here, hitting the delete key, watch what will happen over that 3-second period of time. Watch the 1. It'll be a fade. Because we've said it's 0 opacity here, but it's 100% here. So if I was to just let that go, it would slowly be fading in. It would not look realistic at all. It would look pretty bad, to be honest. So what you do is you go just before you want it to appear. And now instead of fading it, we're going to set it to 0. And we're going to make sure we have a keyframe. So the way I did it the first time was I simply clicked again here, made sure it was 0 where I wanted it to remain 0. So that's going to be your biggest challenge, is understanding how to use these in terms of a light switch, turning one on and turning one off. But overall, take this philosophy, try it, add more numbers on top, and that is all you have to do. I'll turn this back on so we can watch the full thing one more time, and we'll have a score of 0. After 3 seconds, one of them becomes a 1. And if you want to, you can get rid of those squares by clicking anywhere in your field. So if you're clicked on it, you'll see these squares. Click away, click like this, and you'll see it change. If I was really concerned, I would make sure the size of these is identical, so you wouldn't see a visual change other than the number. So in this case, these images were slightly different sizes, so it kind of jumps out a bit. But that's the philosophy. Take that, apply it, and you're ready to go.